Again with Miss Mary. This is A&P Chapter 23, Hematologic and Lymphatic Systems. Let's go and let's rock and roll. So the hematologic system, that's your blood, which is your plasma, the liquid, and then the formed elements in the blood cells. And then you have your bone marrow. That's part of the hematological system. The lymphatic system includes lymphatic vessels, lymph fluid, tissues, nodules. And then there are accessory organs, the spleen, the liver, and the kidneys. The spleen stores and filters blood, part of your immune response too. Your liver destroys old hemoglobin and takes out the heme, the iron part, stores it for later. The kidneys make erythropoietin, and you need erythropoietin to get sent to your bone marrow to make red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. So what does this hematological system do? Well, its biggest job is to transport oxygen and carbon dioxide. The hemoglobin carries oxygen to all your body parts, your organs, your tissues, your brain, and then picks up carbon dioxide to return back to the lungs so your lungs can expel it. There are also some other function. It really helps regulate the blood volume, right? Antibody production, coagulation, which is the blood's ability to clot, and some other things. But just know about the oxygen and the carbon dioxide. They're the important pieces. There are white blood cells that fight disease and infection, and they're called leukocytes. There are platelets that help clot. They're also called thrombocytes. And white blood cells provide immunity due to antibodies and antitoxins, and that's not white blood cells, that's immunoglobulins. So I'm going to fix that right now. So, and we'll talk more about those in a little while. Okay, so here is a tube of blood. So when you go to the lab, they draw your blood. They take that tube of blood, they put it in what's something called a centrifuge. It's this machine that spins the blood super fast so it separates the plasma from the elements. So what you have is the plasma, the liquid part, and yeah, it looks yellow. You have the bottom is the red, which is the formed elements. That's your blood cells. In other words, like your red blood cells and so on and so forth. And then this little thing that they call, I love the name, the Buffy coat. That's just kind of like a divider of albumin in between, okay, which is a plasma protein. So you've got white blood cells, red blood cells, and platelets. And we'll talk about the numbers that you have later on. So how do we make red blood cells? The formation of red blood cells is a process called hematopoiesis, made in the red bone marrow, long bones, long and flat irregular bones like the sternum, cranial bones, the vertebrae, the pelvis, the femur. The red bone marrow in there makes your blood cells, makes all of them, makes red blood cells, makes white blood cells, makes platelets. Lymphatic tissue, like in the spleen and the lymph nodes and the thymus gland, only makes lymphocytes. Red blood cells look like this. They're kind of like a roundish, ovalish shape, and they have a concaved or a recess in the middle. Okay, if you can see it better here. And their job is, first of all, a red blood cell picks up iron, which is heme, clings to it, and then it becomes hemoglobin. Then it travels through your blood, picking up carbon dioxide, which is waste, and delivering oxygen, which is what all your tissues need to survive, okay? So the carbon dioxide, the red blood cells, the hemoglobin brings to the lungs so that you exhale, get rid of carbon dioxide, inhale, and you get oxygen, okay? That's their major function. Hemoglobin, okay? So when we talk about hemoglobin, it's a red blood cell that's bound to a heme, which is an iron, and it's got globins inside. That's the red. That's why it looks red. Okay? It's really all you need to know. Because of the hemoglobin in here, the heme and the globins attached to that red blood cell, that enables that hemoglobin to carry oxygen and carry carbon dioxide. Pretty amazing. What's the life cycle of a red blood cell? Well, if your oxygen levels in your body decrease, your kidneys go, uh-oh, and they make this stuff called erythropoietin, and they'll send it to the red bone marrow. The red bone marrow makes erythrocytes, which become reticulocytes. Those are baby red blood cells. They get released, and then they mature into full-grown red blood cells. Once those oxygen levels in your body get back up to where they're supposed to be, remember homeostasis, then erythropoietin and RBC production just stop. Okay, we got enough. We can take a break. Okay, they do that just all on their own. And this is just another explanation of what I just said, but this takes it a step further. So red blood cells live about 120 days. Make sure you know that, okay? Then they die, okay? They break up and they get consumed by these phagocytes that are in the spleen and the liver, mostly the liver. When the liver breaks up those dead red blood cells, it takes the heme, the iron, stores it, and whatever is left, the waste, is bilirubin, okay? And that's going to make sense when we start talking more about the liver, okay? Because bilirubin just gets, your liver takes that bilirubin, excretes it into your bowel, and it goes out in your poop, and you never even know it. Okay. Then we have the lymphatic system. What is it for? I don't want to get into all the functions of the lymphatic system, but here's what you do need to know. It protects us by filtering waste products out of the blood and foreign substances. It can destroy bacteria. It helps in the production of antibodies to fight against pathogens, and it helps to remove or drain fluid from interstitial tissue, okay? And the lymphatic system manufactures white blood cells, lymphocytes, monocytes, and a few red blood cells, erythrocytes, but mostly white. Is the following statement true or false? The hematologic and lymphatic systems provide the body with necessary protective functions. I mean, if you said true, that was kind of easy. That's true. Okay. What is blood? Okay. Blood is a fluid with elements, formed elements in it that helps keep our body in homeostasis, because that's all our body's trying to do is stay balanced. Blood aids in transportation, regulation, and protection. And I'm going to expand on that. Okay. Hematopoiesis is the production, multiplication, maturation, and specialization of blood cells in bone marrow. It's the manufacturing of blood cells in the bone marrow. Hematopoiesis. Know that. Okay. Red bone marrow manufactures all blood cells, red cells, white cells, and platelets. The lymph nodes, the spleen, and the thymus contribute to agranular white blood cells. Erythropoiesis is the formation of the RBCs. And in order to make it, you need erythropoietin from the kidneys, and you need iron, protein, amino acids, and B vitamins. Okay. Erythropoietin is a hormone secreted by the kidneys, which tells the stem cells in bone marrow that they could produce white, red, or platelets. It says, hey, I want you to make red blood cells. So the blood's composed of plasma and formed elements, and it's in a closed pumping system that's connected to your heart. Your average adult has about 4 to 6 liters of blood in the body at any given time. Okay. Lab values, gots to know them, and here they are. Hemoglobin, 12 to 18. Thrombocytes, 150 to 450,000. Red blood cells, 4 million to 6 million. Hematocrit, that's the percentage of formed elements in the liquid blood, 35 to 50%. White blood cells are 5 to 10,000. You do not need to know the numbers for the differential, but if you're curious, this is them. The differential is the breakdown of the specific white blood cells, which are neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes, eosinophils, and basophils. But you don't need to know them. You're welcome. Okay, next. So the plasma is the liquid portion of the blood. It's about 55% of your blood volume. It's mostly water and about 10% plasma proteins and electrolytes, nutrients, and that kind of stuff. The electrolytes are sodium, calcium, potassium, and magnesium. There's also bicarbonates and sulfates and chlorides, but you don't need to know all that. It's mostly water, okay? You do need to know about albumin. Albumin is a plasma protein, and it maintains the pressure in the blood and the circulating blood volume. Fibrinogen and prothrombin are 2 of many factors that contribute to the blood's ability to clot. And globulin, gamma globulin, IgG, is an antibody that attacks specific antigens. So there are the formed elements that are in the blood. Red blood cells, that's most of them, okay? Most numerous in the body. They're made in the bone marrow, they're fragile, and they last 120 days. We talked about the erythropoietin, stimulates the bone marrow to make 120 to 180 million red blood cells about every minute. Crazy. You don't need to know that, but that's a fun fact. But you do need to know that erythropoiesis begins when the kidney makes erythropoietin. Macrophages, they're the Pac-Man, club, 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 in the liver and the spleen, ingest old used red blood cells and take the iron, right, out of it and send the iron back to the bone marrow so it can make new RBCs. The waste product is the bilirubin. And each red blood cell contains more than 250 million molecules of hemoglobin. That's why there's 4 to 6 million red blood cells and 12 to 18,000 of the hemoglobin, right? As the red blood cells move through the capillaries, through the blood vessels, oxygen transfer occurs. It drops off oxygen to the cells and then picks up carbon dioxide, brings it to the lungs. Okay, so you get rid of it. Pulse oximetry, it's an indirect measurement of how much oxygen is in your arterial blood, right? In your capillary beds. So it's not exact, but it's a good ballpark for the most part. So we talked already about what red blood cells do. So the book says that additional functions are producing and releasing ATP, dilation of blood vessels, iron, and immune response. I want you to know that red blood cells transport oxygen and carbon dioxide, and that I did a data-based search of peer-reviewed journal articles. And it says many aspects of red blood cell mediated control of your metabolism and ATP release are still speculative or not universally accepted. So in other words, what they said here is not a fact. These are hypotheses. This is a fact. Okay. So make sure you know that. And I even quoted my source. That's how you do research. Okay, is the following statement true or false? People living in high altitudes have more red blood cells than people in lower altitudes, and that's true because each of the red blood cells carries less oxygen. Okay, the air is different the higher you go. So now we got white blood cells, which are leukocytes. That's about 1% of your blood volume because they're mostly made on demand. You have some that are circulating, they're surveillance, they're looking around for bad guys. But if you get an infection, your body will make them on demand. They're formed in the bone marrow and they protect you against diseases and toxins and those kinds of things. If you don't have enough white blood cells, that condition is called, that's spelled with a K, leukopenia. And leukopenia can happen because of certain medications and different diseases. Okay. And another fun fact, the purulent drainage or pus that sometimes develops in a wound, that is actually white blood cells, the macrophages that have eaten up the bacteria and they turn to this purulent drainage. So that thick yellow, green stuff, that's mostly white blood cells. How about that? Don't worry about the fixed leukocytes. You don't need to know that. Okay. What types of white blood cells do we have? We have 5 different kinds and 2 types. We have granulocytes and agranulocytes. The granulocytes are basophils, eosinophils, and neutrophils. And the agranulocytes are lymphocytes and monocytes. Okay. And let's talk about what they do because they each kind of do a certain thing. So the neutrophils, they're the first line of defense. They're the ones that are going through the blood and looking for bad guys. They don't live long, but they can increase when you're infected to save you. They go where they're needed. If you get sick and you're immunocompromised, think about an older person who goes septic, who has septicemia, a blood infection. When you look at their lab results, what you'll see is an increase in the number of bands. So bands are baby neutrophils. You may hear the doctor say, uh-oh, there was a shift to the left. That means that there are more baby white blood cells than mature white blood cells. It's like we ran out of soldiers and we're sending our kids to war. The babies are going to war. That is bad. That is bad because the baby neutrophils can't fight infection the way the adults can. Okay. Don't worry about these. Okay. Eosinophils, when you hear eosinophil, think allergies. Eosinophils, allergies. Basophils, inflammation and allergies. Okay. The basophils are the ones that release histamine, which is that substance that makes your eyes watery and your nose run and all that, okay? Your lymphocytes, okay, and granulocytes, lymphocytes are the smallest, and you have Bs and Ts. The B lymphocytes, remember, humoral immunity, they make antibodies that bind to pathogens. The T lymphocytes, your T cells, CD4 T helper cells, they coordinate your immune response, and the CD8 cells are your cytotoxic T cells, your killer Ts. Not natural killers, but killers. Then your monocytes have to do with inflammatory processes that are acute and chronic. So, you know, they can be associated with things like tuberculosis and other chronic diseases. Okay. And that's looking at phagocytosis, the Pac-Man effect, right? So there's endothelial cell, your red blood cell, white blood cell. This is the capillary. This is the blood, okay? This is the bad guy. That's the pathogen. That's the bacteria. Well, the leukocyte sees it and goes, you can't be in here, and literally eats it up, just like Pac-Man. And it can't hurt you. Platelets. Platelets are also formed in the bone marrow, megakaryocytes, which are the beginnings of the platelets. You need them for your blood to clot. They actually make blood vessels contract, and they form this thing called a hemostatic plug, so that they, you know, it helps make a scab so that you stop bleeding if you get cut. So how does your blood clot? The process of clotting is called hemostasis. Hemo, blood. Stasis means still or stop bleeding, right? Cessation of bleeding. So the initial response is this vasoconstriction. The blood vessels will start to constrict, and then the clotting will start. Okay, there's a whole cascade of events that has to happen for the blood to clot and for it to form a scab so that you don't bleed to death. This is a very nice flow chart. You don't need to know it all, but please take a look at it. It kind of just roughly goes over, you know, injury and how our blood clots. So when it comes to blood clotting, vitamin K is necessary to form prothrombin and other clotting factors. Hint, vitamin K, fun fact, is the antidote for the anticoagulant warfarin. You need to know that, okay? So vitamin K, necessary for formation of prothrombin and clotting. It's stored in your liver, and it's the antidote for warfarin. What's a thrombus? A clot that's staying still, and an embolus is a clot that's traveling. It's on the move. What is a hemorrhage? Losing a lot of blood from a cut or something, right? A blood vessel or accident. What is a transfusion? Transfusion means we're replacing blood or blood components after a pretty severe hemorrhage. Let's talk about blood types, okay? Blood types are genetic, and they are grouped in groups. There's 4 of them. There's group A, B, AB, and O, okay? And it's important for you to know blood group AB positive is the universal recipient, and O negative is the universal donor. Let me explain, okay? I love this chart, okay? The surface of the blood cell carries a protein, that's the antigen. There's 2 antigens, A and B. So if you have type A blood, you have the A antigen. If you have type B blood, you have the B antigen. If you have AB blood, you have A and B antigens. And if you have O blood, you don't have either. You don't have either, you're nothing, okay? So then going beyond the groups of blood, we have the Rh factor. You either have it or you don't. Your blood is either Rh positive or it's Rh negative. If an Rh negative person gets Rh positive blood, it could kill them. It'll cause such a severe anaphylactic reaction because of the development of antibodies against that foreign blood that you could die. So just remember it like this. If you have negative blood, you can't get positive blood because I can't give you something that you don't have. But if you have positive blood, you can get positive or negative blood because the negative blood doesn't have any Rh in it, so it doesn't matter. So try to wrap your head around that one. This is a little compatibility chart I don't love it, but I left it here for you to take a look at. And when we talk about lymph fluid, this is just looking at all the lymphatic vessels and lymph fluid and nodules that are in the body. The thymus gland, the bone marrow that's involved in the production of lymphocytes, and the spleen, the lymph nodes, and intestinal lymphoid tissue and tonsils. These are all parts of the lymphatic system. All about fighting infection, immune response, also removal of excess interstitial fluid, right, from tissues. We're not going to get into this because I went into the formation of lymph and all that stuff in the other PowerPoint. But there you go. Most of your lymph nodules are in clusters, like clusters of grapes, in the neck, the groin, and the axillary area. Okay. Filters out and destroys pathogens. If you have an infection, if you catch a cold, if you have the flu, any infection, your lymph nodes will start to swell and they will be tender. They will hurt. Okay. If they swell and there's no pain, which is painless lymphadenopathy, that means painless swollen lymph nodes, that can be related to Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is a type of cancer. It's not a good one either. Okay. There's your tonsils. They are there as a protective barrier for filtering substances. We talked about the spleen, what the spleen does. It filters your blood and stores blood. T cells are trained in the thymus. Remember that? That's where T cells go, because the thymus is big when you're little and it's little when you're big. Okay? Because when you're little, the T cells get trained there to recognize your own stuff so they can protect you. Is the following statement true or false? A slight enlargement of the tonsils is an indication for surgery. No, absolutely not. If they're enlarged chronically, possibly yes, but not, they're going to enlarge if you're sick. It's a response. This is blood circulation, which I am going to go into great detail in the next one, which is cardiovascular, the heart. So we're going to kind of leave that alone. Just know, when I say systemic circulation, I'm talking about oxygenated blood from the left ventricle to the body. And then there's something called the hepatic portal circulation, which I will talk about in the next PowerPoint. So there's a nice picture of the portal system, the blood that gets fed to your liver, so your liver can filter your blood for toxins. That's the hepatic portal system. Okay. Then you also have cerebral or brain circulation. You have a carotid artery, one on each side of your neck, that feeds oxygenated blood to this thing at the base of your brain called the circle of Willis. Okay. The circle of Willis is what feeds the rest of your brain oxygenated blood. And you also have this nifty thing called the blood-brain barrier. It is a semi-permeable membrane between the blood and the interstitium of the brain, which basically is Donald Trump's wall. It'll let certain things in, and it won't let certain things in. It protects your brain. Blood-brain barrier. There's a great picture of the circle of Willis, which is right there. And it shows you the different arteries. There are the carotids that feed it, and then it goes to these main cerebral arteries, which feed all the little tiny cerebral arteries. And the effects of aging. We always end these PowerPoints with the effects of aging. Everything slows down the end. The effects of aging, right? Stem cells, bone marrow reserves are less platelets. Fatty marrow replaces red marrow. Not in me. B12 absorption is impaired because of low production of intrinsic factor in the stomach. Hemoglobin levels can decrease. Absorption of vitamin K can be impaired. And this tells you all the different effects that these things can have. For everybody else, last question. The blood-brain barrier decides what can and cannot enter certain areas in the brain. Yep. It protects the whole brain. It really does. And it won't let any toxins or anything except ammonia. It lets ammonia in, and we'll talk about that when we get to GI med surg. All right, I hope you enjoyed this. It was fun. Next is cardiac, and that's so much fun. I love cardiac. Okay, guys, see you next time. Bye.